Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today is Armenia Zeytunsyan, inaugural chairperson of the State Tourism Committee and independent advisor in the tourism and cultural sector. The COVID-19 pandemic has struck Armenia's tourism hard, and this summer domestic tourism became one of the main source of income of restaurants, hotels, and other tourism establishments. Welcome, Mrs. Zeytunsyan.
Thank you for inviting, Ani.
Thank you for coming. As in the entire world, Armenia's economy has not been spared by the COVID-19 outbreak. But what is the general situation in tourism right now in Armenia?
I think, as you said, and you were right, Armenia has not been spared. According to UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization, the world has seen about 65 to 80% drop in tourism, and the world lost about 1 billion tourists, so Armenia is not exclusive in that sense. The statistics didn't even provide the tourist numbers after the first quarter of 2020 because there was no need. The borders have been closed, so the same picture you can actually observe in Armenia as well.
And this summer, another phenomenon developed. That's according to the government and media. Domestic tourism seemed to grow, but is that so? Because according to the National Statistics Committee of Armenia, recent report about tourism, besides the low number of tourists from foreign countries because of the outbreak, domestic tourism has also collapsed.
Let me view this from two different angles. If we talk about numbers, yes, compared to last year, the domestic tourism number dropped. However, I want to talk about the demographics of tourists. Demographics of domestic tourists changed. The tourists, Armenians who usually spend and love sea and sand vacation and go out of the country during summer, we all had to stay in Armenia. And we rediscovered the country in a very different way. So the quality of tourists and the demographics of tourists change. So people who were not usually travelers in Armenia were, I would say, from demographic or behavioral standpoint, people who were unaware of what is there in Armenia and usually thought there is nothing interesting to see. They were forced to stay in Armenia and travel. So I see a lot of people who not only changed their opinion, but rediscovered and were very happy to be in Armenia. So I would rather talk about the change of quality in tourists and also the type of experiences that they saw in Armenia. The same domestic tourists who have been to main attractions, and as we know, Garni, Gerard, Stevan, and they thought that there is nothing else to see. All of a sudden this summer were offered a lot of different interesting places to go because a lot of them tour operators, especially daily tour operators, started offering interesting packages for hiking, for going to undiscovered places, for going a little far from the comfort zone of regular tourism itineraries, going to Marsis and regions that are further away to drive, offering natural attractions and offering experiential tourism, which are master classes, which are interaction with the locals and communities. So in that sense, again, the numbers might have dropped, and of course they would have, because we also have the social package, which is the government package where the government employees go on vacation as well. For the last several years, this played a significant role in actually fostering the growth of domestic tourism. But this year, again, in the first quarter, as we know, in the second quarter, as we know, we couldn't even get out of our houses. So in that sense, yes, numbers have dropped. But we still yet have to see the numbers for summer, which I'm hoping is going to be at least either comparable to last year's numbers or even an increase. But again, the important thing here is about the rediscovery, and Armenia found a new segment of domestic tourism.
Let's talk about the quality you just said. You just talked about, so Armenians and Armenia had to organize those new kind of vacation domestically. But however, we know that there are not sufficient infrastructure, even to meet domestic holidays in Armenia. We hear many people when they are reviewing different hotels or restaurants or places they stayed in, they are criticizing, saying that the service is not meeting the demand. So my question is, what is your opinion about this, and how Armenian tourism can become more competitive even for Armenians and outside people, tourists?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. Recently, about a month ago, I also wrote not a very positive review about my experiences in hotels in one of the marzes of Armenia. Statistically, domestic tourists are more demanding than foreign tourists. It's an interesting phenomenon. First of all, because foreign tourists are usually coming, of course now there is a lot of individual tourists, but most of them are coming either with a tour operator, or even if they're coming here by themselves, they are more forgiving to the foreign country because they have the expectation. They don't have the expectation to have the same high quality service they might have in, let's say, luxury hotels, in luxury resorts, because they know that they're coming to a developing country. So expectation and the real experience for international tourists is different. However, the expectation and experience of the local tourist, weirdly said, is much higher, because when we travel abroad, we go to the countries that are known for their hospitality, mostly Greece, Malta, Egypt, because, as I said, we love sea and sand vacation. So when we come back and we go to our domestic tourism suppliers, our requirements are much, much higher. I would say not much, but much higher than international tourists. Besides, international tourists usually don't stay in one place for more than 2 or 3 days because they love to travel. We are more, the domestic tourists spend more time in one hotel. So you have more time to see all the glitches, you understand, you see the quality of service. So in that sense, yes, this year also was a wake-up call for local tourism suppliers. Unfortunately, there is no law or regulation of how to make sure that people who are hired by these hotels at least have a minimum level of education. This is something that I know that government has been working on for a long time. Either it's called the licensing of the hotels or hospitality industry, or at least creating some sort of requirements where all employees of the hotels have to be trained and have to go through at least the minimum level of education in hospitality sector.
So you just gave a hint of how should the service be, but according to you as an expert of tourism, how should Armenia's post-COVID pandemic look like in the sector of tourism, according to you?
You mean international or domestic?
Well, for Armenia, hosting people from outside, but also domestically.
I think we need to seriously think about what we are really offering. Before pandemic, I don't want to say inertia, because there was a lot of marketing effort done, but I have to go back to marketing again. We really need to be on top of charts and on top of lists of Armenia as a tourism destination. And there is a saying that when times are good, you should advertise. When times are bad, you must advertise. So in that sense, I will say that not much has changed in terms of Armenia's offering, and it was pretty attractive for tourists pre-pandemic, but we also need to understand that, first of all, we need to make sure that we're not on the blacklist of countries that are suggested not to visit. So we have to make sure that we adhere to all the safety and health regulations that our tourism suppliers and hotels actually adhere to these regulations. And I know that the tourism committee is actually very soon, or already have posted the list of regulations that are going to be actually implemented by all tourism suppliers. I think it's time, it has been time, and we also lost time. We needed to advertise, we need to promote our country in a little bit of a different way than before, in a sense that saying that we're here and we're waiting for you. That's the message. That's what I think the key message should be of our advertising. But in these times, It's again, as I said, very important not to lose momentum, because there is also a very interesting phenomena in the world. It's called revenge travel. People are so sick and tired of staying homes that after borders open, people are going to even spend more time and more money traveling. So if Armenia is not under the radar of potential tourists, then we're going to lose a lot of opportunities.
And talking about those opportunities, where do Armenia need to put the focus on more on gastrotourism, cultural tourism? What is the added value of Armenia that can be more exploited for tourism?
Just yesterday I was discussing this same issue with my colleagues, and interestingly, we Armenians, because we know our history, we know our background, we always are trying to look for something new to offer to the world. However, if you do a research, even empirical research shows that the fact that Armenia is the first Christian country, the fact that we have 25,000 monuments, the fact that we have an ancient heritage is not known to the world. So I would go after the lowest hanging fruit, and instead of inventing new types of tourism, new ways of tourism, just capitalize on the fact that we're the first Christian country, capitalize on the fact that we have 10,000-year-old petroglyphs, capitalize on the fact that we have these ancient monuments, of course, and go after the low involvement tourism development, which doesn't involve big investment. All we need is a good packaging of our gastro experiences, wine experiences. But at this point, at least for several years, I would rather position Armenia as a cultural tourism destination, with of course also focusing on some niche markets such as adventure tourism, for example, which is really developing in Armenia. However, cultural tourism, I think, is our added value, but we need to position it right, we need to package it right, and we need to introduce it to the world in the right way, which I don't think we are doing a good job at.
Even if we go back to domestic tourism has grown and brought more of interest of Armenians towards their own country, would you say that the domestic tourism is more profitable or as profitable as external tourism?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I can't remember the numbers now, but in 2017, when we calculated the overall gross revenues from international and domestic tourism, we had a little over 1 million tourists, domestic tourists in Armenia, and 1.5 international tourists. The gap of revenue is pretty big. So I still think we need international visitors. We're not China. China, for example, is relying a lot on its domestic tourism, but we talk about huge numbers of people who travel domestically. Armenians, even if 3 million people travel domestically, by the way, I forgot also to mention, we're talking about what domestic tourists are looking for. We're also looking for highest quality for lowest price. This is also a trend in domestic tourism as well. So in that sense, I would say no, we still need international tourists in order to make the tourism industry bloom.
Okay, and tourism, and this is the last question, tourism is one of the key sectors of development of Armenia, and it has become one of the key factors in which the government of Nikol Pashinyan is focusing on. What should be done in terms of the country's branding? Is it still to attract tourists from outside? We talked about our heritage, ancient heritage, about the packaging, about the marketing. Do you think that if we achieve all that, then we will see a huge development of tourism?
That's a very, very long question to answer. I can answer for hours. I try to be as brief as possible. When we talk about country branding, I think countries have been successfully doing communication campaigns which are very focused, targeted, and with a very strict time frame. So of course Armenia hasn't done branding yet. However, analyzing other countries' examples, we can do very successful communication campaigns targeted at certain countries and certain markets, because Armenia is interesting. Armenia has many faces, and to different countries and to different segments and to different markets, we have to introduce ourselves with that very particular face. And the communication campaigns at this point, I think, for Armenia can be more successful than doing overall branding for the whole country. Besides talking about that, I would say that as every corporation and company has a PR communications office, our country has to have a PR communications office adjacent or under the auspices of the Prime Minister. I don't think Tourism Committee or tourism authorized body is right now it's the only body who is promoting Armenia outside of Armenia. I think tourism has to be the beneficiary of the overall public relations and communications campaign that Armenia can successfully do, but it has to be out of the scope of the tourism committee. It has to be done on a higher, much higher level. And it doesn't only include tourism, it includes export, it includes exporting the culture, exporting our wines, exporting our brandy, so it's much, much higher. And also doing, I would say, I don't like this term, but I use it for working as a working term, public advocacy, in terms of making sure that Armenia exists on all platforms, cultural, political, touristic, which we are badly failing at this moment. And also I wanted to say, when you said what needs to be done, a lot in terms of marketing and promotion and packaging, but also we also have to, I always want to talk about this, and I have to emphasize this here as well, uncontrolled development in Armenia. This is a very sad phenomenon that I see, because our touristic destinations, our cities, they all have master plans or general master plan, architectural plans, which are deeply hidden in the drawers of government officials. If we don't do master plans and we don't implement and make sure that not a single stone can be moved without adhering to the guidelines of the master plan, in 10 years we will have this chaotic, uncontrolled development that we are already experiencing.
In Yerevan, you mean?
No, in Yerevan and in the regions where people build hotels, restaurants, any constructions without any guidance, according to their own taste, according to their own perceptions, according to their own desires, which a lot of times doesn't adhere to the local architectural, I would say, landscape, and even worse, a lot of times they demolish historic buildings, not only in Yerevan, I can see in Dilijan as well, where or Gyumri, where Gyumri also is at risk, because once the place starts to develop, then developers, investors come, and if they don't have a clear guidance on what they can or cannot do, we might lose our historical heritage as well. So a lot of things needs to be done. I have a list of 20 important points that I think needs to be done for tourism development, but because of the time constraints, I can focus on this one. It's uncontrolled development of the touristic destinations in Armenia.
Are you, your team, and also the government, and I guess other structures working already on the next summer and for the tourism development right now?
We are actually, there is a very interesting program coming soon. I'm consulting with an interesting program. It's a Smithsonian Institute of Washington, and I'm a consultant with My Armenia program. So we are focusing on diaspora Armenians for next year, and we are focusing also on developing experiential tourism in Armenia, because one more important issue, community development, is the anchor of sustainable tourism development. So these are not the historical monuments or natural monuments, but Armenia is about people who live and create in the communities and also carry on the legacy of our ancestors in terms of intangible heritage. So this is what My Armenia program is doing, and we have artisans, we have master classes, workshop experiences in 5 regions of Armenia. So I think we're creating an ample and critical mass class of touristic offer to engage diasporan Armenians next year, because those who have been to Armenia and have been to the major attractions might think that there is nothing more to see. So we would like to show them there is much more happening. Festivals, about 38 or 40 festivals, and a lot of things to do in the regions. As for the state tourism body, I'm in close connection with them, and they're also preparing a very strong marketing strategy for the target markets for next year to be ready, but we have to start now.
Wish you good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for this talk, Mrs. Zeytunyan. Thank you for watching and continue to follow CivilNet.